Thanks, Brian. My name is Tobias, or it's better known as Groby everywhere pretty much on the internet, besides Twitter, unfortunately. A couple of months ago, actually, Julius talked to me and announced there will be a Prometheus conference. And afterwards, he kind of talked me into flying over from New York to Berlin and to give a talk. And I thought about, okay, what could I talk about? And I came up with the history of Prometheus because I thought, what would be a good point to give that kind of talk? It's probably the first conference. Afterwards, it's known to everyone. And you might ask, okay, why am I the guy to talk about the history of Prometheus? So there are obviously the founders, Julius and Matt of Prometheus, and then there are three very active core contributors like Björn, Brian, and Fabian. And I guess I would describe myself as kind of the companion of Prometheus. I happen to be the third one who committed to Prometheus, the third one who was on the mailing list, and the third one who joined the IRC channel. So I was kind of always near Prometheus. You might have seen I wrote the Ruby client the Ruby client library and a couple of exporters, but mostly just glued Prometheus together at SoundCloud and let the other people do the actual hard work. But that gave me a pretty good insight, and actually had the honor to work together with all the core contributors except Brian, as he just said, because he was never actually at SoundCloud. So without further ado, let's talk about the history of Prometheus. So November 24, 2012, Prometheus was started at SoundCloud. That's actually completely wrong. SoundCloud did not start Prometheus. Actually, it was, in the beginnings, Matt Proud who started to work on Prometheus, to think about time series databases, to think about the problem of monitoring. He told me even in 2011, for real and with real experiments, he started then in February 2012, so way before he actually joined SoundCloud. He saw a huge need for great open source time series monitoring, and actually his vision or his scope did not limit it to just infrastructure monitoring as we know Prometheus mostly these days, with application monitoring and network monitoring and all this ops stuff. He actually envisioned something way bigger, and I guess we have some use cases for that as well. He has friends and talked to other people in biology, in chemicals. He had worked on one project where they put sensors out in the Bay Area to measure the water pollution, and he needed a time series database for that. So he wanted to collect a lot more data than just software. I guess it's good that we focused on one part, but it was pretty interesting to me to hear how big he had envisioned that. And what he found for these problems was pretty much OpenTSDB, which was nice and probably fit a lot of these use cases, but was pretty complex to set up. And he didn't want to bother with HBase or any of the other problems. And the rest was the standard RD tool based, which are pretty insufficient and don't provide any of the problems he wanted to have or features he wanted to have. So he started the research in 2012. He looked at actually a lot of other languages than Go in the beginning. Go was kind of the last choice. He looked a lot at Cassandra, but then in the end decided against it for complexity reasons. And the oldest repository we'll actually find is the client Golang library. That's from March 2012. He was still at Google at that point. And the Prometheus server, as we know it these days, was started in August in a private repository. And then actually in November, he did a clean cut and new commit in a new repository. It was not a Prometheus at that point, but that's kind of the inception of the server as we know it today, these days. Then in September 2012, he joined Suncloud, and then a month later, Julius joined. So the goals, I won't really talk too much about that. You all know the goals of Prometheus, with and we all love them, with the great label dimensions, the powerful query language. The operational simplicity, that was one of his huge goals he wanted to achieve. And I'm pretty sure as soon as he joined SoundCloud and saw if something fall, then it fall like in all crazy ways. I'm very sure that part became like a lot more important. So yeah, he didn't want to have like rely on any orchestration system and don't have like any dependencies on databases or sharding systems or any of these problems. Another one, which actually came then also more from Julius' side, where to have like very strong interfaces for all the definitions, especially the ingestion format, which was like at like previous systems which existed in the space, not always like as well defined. So it was like important to have very clear and defined standards for that. It's the same for like having a type query language, and you should not need to second guess what's happening or like have like some, I don't know, doubt that it might be something else what you're typing there. Everything in the query language should be completely understandable and clear to everyone who knows the query language. And yeah, the same applies then, of course, for like world storage and query API, like strong interfaces, or like a strong goal for all of these. And yeah, actually using proven and mature technologies, which is interesting. So okay, there's like two parts. He looked at that part at that point where like protocol buffers and level DB. He had like great experience with both of them, and the early versions of Prometheus all used level DB, and we still have protocol buffers, and I'm actually really happy with that part. One part which was kind of a gamble in the beginning for him was Go. When he started working on Prometheus, Go just hit like 1.0. I think one of the first versions were then compiled with Go 1.1, but Go was still a pretty young language. The garbage collection has like improved a lot over time. Actually, every time Go releases a new version, we see like huge performance increases with Prometheus, which is great, but also means that Go was in the beginning not as efficient as it could have been, or like an implementation in C++ or maybe even Java might have been. So that was kind of a gamble, and like bit contradicts the proven and mature technologies, but yeah, we'll come back later to that. I think it was a pretty good choice. Yeah, so as I said, Julius joined like a month later. I think you did not know each other before, right? Nope. Yeah. So Julius met this guy, Matt, and Matt started talking about Prometheus and like this huge vision. As I said, it went even way beyond software. And if I may quote, Julius' reaction was pretty much like that. It's way too big, this problem of like writing a complete monitoring system with alerting and graphing, and maybe modeled a bit of like some system both of them knew from some previous employer, seemed to be like a way too big task to like tackle. But as I understood, Matt was really convincing and really sure that this is possible and that this is necessary in the open source space, and that someone has to tackle the problem, and that Julius and Matt are the someone. So at the end of 2012, still nothing at SoundCloud. No one actually knew at SoundCloud that these two guys were in their free time like talking about that and starting hacking on this prototype. They sat together and started working on Prometheus. So how did the SoundCloud infrastructure look like in 2012, or what was the point at SoundCloud? So on the one side, I'm paraphrasing here Julius again, for like an outsider coming into the company, SoundCloud was pretty advanced already. So we wrote our own container orchestration system. Mind you, this was like way before Docker came out. But yeah, I mean, we also inspired by Google and like some papers which were out. We found out, okay, we need something which makes it easy to like deploy a new service somewhere and like not let our developers go to a configuration management. We use Chef, and yeah, still use Chef, and like set up cookbooks and recipes to deploy something on a single machine. They should just be able to like build an image and say like, okay, once it's somewhere, I'm the developer, I don't really care about like where it runs, I just need some CPU cycles and some memory, make it happen. So we built this, and this was already available at the end of 2012. Yeah, it's called Bazooka. It's pretty similar to Kubernetes, or like you will find like a lot of the concepts again. We still use it. We're like at the moment in the middle of the migration to Kubernetes, but it has served us really, really well. Similar to Kubernetes, there is like some agent or like some mastermind in the middle. We used a consensus store which like keeps all the data, and then on every single machine we call it a process manager is running this thing which then actually schedules container there. That enabled really fast deployment of new services. People just needed to it was like kind of modeled also after Heroku. So you said like Bazooka init, and you had like a new application after your repository name, and then you said like Bazooka build, and it packed up your Git repository into an image, and then you said like Bazooka scale, and it scaled up some images, and you were done. This was like, I don't know, a couple of like order of magnitudes faster than what we had previously with Chef, where people were like working up to like weeks to like get their servers up and running. So this was awesome. It provided, I mean, that's like kind of an artifact of that. Deploys became like really dynamic. No one cared anymore. So before, everything was like scheduled of like, okay, this machine will like run this role, and it's like an app server, and okay, take another machine, and this is like a cache server. So we always like a human assigned a job to a machine. And now it was like a machine just saying like, hey, there is some free space, I will like run this container there. But it made like the whole infrastructure pretty dynamic, and I will come back to that, why that became then a problem. On the other side, the ugly part, we were not really advanced at all. We had like a huge, and we actually still have a huge monolithic Rails application. It's still running. We call it the mothership. Twitter calls it the monorail. I think these are the things which will never die. We're working on it. And yeah, most of the other services we built like Bazooka for were actually not really in the critical path at that point. So we were like mostly, I think it was search and some payment services, though they were like the first teams which said like, okay, we don't want to have our stuff in the mothership anymore. We really need to build our own services, and then lots of analytics jobs. I actually looked up at GitHub and counted all the repositories which existed at the end of 2012. And we had at that point already 200 repositories, which still exist today. Otherwise, I couldn't count them. So it might be even like, I don't know, 250 or something. So we had like a lot of services, but the user interfacing part, or what you see if you go to SoundCloud, this was pretty much all handled by the Rails application. And with Bazooka, we were just like preparing for a shift to a microservice architecture. And besides that, our infrastructure was like pretty common, as it looked like these days. And on the top were some load balancers, then the traffic went down to the application servers, or like before there were some caches, then came the application server, then came some other caches, and then eventually you hit the database. But it was like a pretty standard top-down approach. On the monitoring side, it was even uglier. Well, okay, for one, we had like, I guess pretty much all of the available open source tools in use. But yeah, Nagios, Graphite, Statsd, Ganglia, Cacti, Moonin. Fun fact, we still have all of them in use except Moonin. Lesson learned, I guess, it's really, yeah, you can't simply like shut down a monitoring system. You always have like some old service still writing out to that, and no one has time to shut that down, so you can't shut down the monitoring service. Fortunately, none of these is really in use, so some obscure service might still write to Graphite, but the traffic is so low that we actually don't touch this Graphite server anymore. So like by now, we don't really use them anymore, but we still can't shut them down. Yeah, and besides like these standard open source tools, it were like the typical Rails software as a service applications available these days, New Relic and Airbrake. If you don't have heard of that, New Relic is like pretty much, if you have a Rails application, it does everything for you. You just like deploy there, and they provide you a pre-built dashboard and everything. It was a pretty good deal, very expensive if you want to run it on all your servers. It doesn't really work. And Airbrake is just for logging errors. So it's not, they are not all in the same space of monitoring. On call at that point was, we had also this old school model. We had like one ops team, and that had pretty much the pager. And we were just about to transition to put like the first infrastructure teams on call exactly for Bazooka, because Bazooka became like such a critical service that we needed someone to be on call for that 24 hours. But yeah, besides that, we were at this point was, I mean, I think SoundCloud had maybe like 40 developers at that point. It was still pretty small, maybe like 50. So we were over the years, we have like transitioned to a different model. And yeah, our monitoring was actually almost exclusive black box alerting. So there were like Nagios, which like does these famous checks everywhere and like goes to some node and asks what the disk space is, and then it's like either over the threshold or not, and it sends out an alert or not. But there is nowhere where like white box monitoring, where like, or actually a time series database involved. At this point, I think we didn't check like any graphite graphs for like errors. It was like, yeah, pretty limited at that point. We still had like problems, even though we didn't even use monitoring that much or as much as we should have. So we had like very little instrumentation. It's like one of the biggest problems we had back at these days. We had no per instance application metrics at all. So like the services which use statsd and graphite, I mean, with graphite is like a limiting source. You can't really put like an instance name in your graphite path if you have like in such high dynamic deploy as we have them with Bazooka or Kubernetes or Docker, where like basically you create like new time series. If you create hundreds of new time series per hour or over the day, you will need to scale graphite, and yeah, we didn't have like put any effort into scaling graphite, so we couldn't really do that. So we had like no per instance metrics at all, and and the large part is like statsd just started to fall apart as well. So like this was actually one of Julius' first jobs at SoundCloud. Was like, hey, we are missing some metrics here, so we are not really sure. There should be really more metrics or like more requests for this application. And Julius started to look into it and then realized, okay, actually with statsd we were like dropping UDP package left and right, because statsd originally is written in Node.js, which can only utilize a single core. All the this core was completely packed at 100%, and then yeah, with a lot of backdoor push. These UDP packages actually never made it to the statsd server. So Julius, one of the first tasks was then or what he built was like kind of like a hierarchy. So where like first the our applications push to a local statsd server, and then the local statsd server batched it up and sent it to the next statsd server, which borders some time, but I think it also made Julius realize that Prometheus is the way to go. So we're still end of 2012, and yeah, as I said, Julius and Matt started hacking in their free time in like kind of a secret project. So Matt had built like the first prototypes, and like there was like some code available, but as I think nothing was really running at that point. So they both started to begin working in isolation. That's actually something I find really interesting. So Matt started to work on the storage part, and at this moment was the only client library available was for Golang. And Julius, on the other side, started to work on the configuration of the server, the query language, and the web interface. And I asked Julius, so actually he did not have anything to test when he wrote the query language, because the storage was not ready yet. So like they both like built stuff up, and either I'm making this up, or then they met at one day and like merged their code together, and it worked. So they had like the first running Prometheus server, and here we moved that. So they had like a first running Prometheus server, end of 2012. So we are jumping to 2013. I'm still in time. And yeah, now things became interesting. So in January, it was still a side project. The Prometheus developers mailing list you all know was created. The Prometheus IO domain was stored, and one test instance was already constantly running. And yeah, for test purposes and like ingesting stuff, and they were like constantly tweaking on that. And at that point, Matt realized, okay, the situation at SoundCloud of having actually no metrics. He was working on the mothership and had like he told me, one of his first projects was like to work on RabbitMQ, and he like completely rewrote the RabbitMQ client, and he put like one canary instance, and then he came to, might even have been me, came to like developers of the mothership and said like, okay, how can I get like metrics for this instance? And we said like, yeah, that's not possible. Look at the logs, or like look if it throws exceptions, otherwise it's good, and go ahead. So yeah, we really, and from Matt, coming from Google, coming from like a pretty more scientific background, where like data first was always like a principle, was like, yeah, at this point, like it hit him of like, okay, I really need to change that. And he started to work, to talk to the other managers or like engineering managers at SoundCloud and said like, hey guys, actually started working on this thing and I believe it could really help us. And only at that point, it started to become a SoundCloud project. Oh yeah, actually before it was really announced, he already added instrumentation to Bazooka. So Bazooka also itself, like this container system we built, had no metrics, so it like didn't export anything. I mean, we knew over Nagios like how much CPU the whole node was using, but otherwise people were just like SSHing into the machine and like doing HTOP and whatever, yeah, solved the job for them. I mean, it was a small company and we needed to move forward, but yeah, for Matt this was obviously now in hindsight for all of us something which was not possible, and yeah, we had actually then the first instrumented service with the client Golang. Then came February, and Julius and Matt gave an internal tech talk at SoundCloud, and showed what they had built and what they had in mind, and started to convince people that labels are really a thing. I mean, none of us had ever. I mean, none of the people that didn't work at Google before. I'm pretty sure have like actually seen a metric system with labels, so that was all pretty new, and I definitely remember that I needed like some, I don't know, lunches to like understand really the beauty of labels, because I was first like, yeah, whatever would get the job done. I mean, dots or labels, what's the big difference? I mean, there is a big difference, as I know, these days. And yeah, also in February then, they started to allocate actual work time during SoundCloud work time to work on Prometheus to build a system which can help us to like actually have all these metrics. They convinced us we will need to like further grow and keep our systems manageable. And also in February, that was then the time when the Java client was born, because SoundCloud slowly at this point started to transition from like a Ruby shop to like a Java shop. So like actually we use Scala mostly, but yeah, we needed some Java. If you had like Java, then most of the other JVM problems were solved. And yeah, actually pretty shortly after, I think in April, the first exposition formats were clearly defined. If you know Matt, he is really good at defining things in a really clear and understandable way, but it gets a bit long at times. And the first two exposition formats were actually JSON and protobuf, which might be a fun fact for some people. So we did not have a text format in the beginning. It was JSON and protobuf. I think Julius touched this briefly yesterday. And then a bit forward, we did not have any service discovery at that point as well. So question, who started to implement service discovery after they saw Prometheus and felt, okay, I need a service discovery now? Okay, a few people. And who started to use DNS for that, because that was what Prometheus offered? Okay. I guess Matt would like to see that, because he actually also came up with the idea of like implementing a service discovery, and it was also then his idea to use DNS for that. What we did so far until this point, we statically configured DNS names. So as I said, we used Chef for like also configuration management. So someone went there, edited a data back, added like some new A record or C name, and like said like, okay, this name points like to this IP, and that's all it. And then you waited like 15 minutes, or I think at that point like 30 minutes, and at some point it appeared, but it was definitely not nice. The whole thing was like, as I said, driven by Chef, so you always had to wait for like our Chef client interval, and it was also really coupled to Chef because we used all the Chef role names as in our service. I mean, it wasn't a service discovery, in our discovery. And all our service-to-service communication we had at that point actually went over HTTP load balancer, and that was all we had. And I mean, it worked pretty much. We started shortly after, we started to see like bottlenecks with our HA proxies. There was no consistency in the naming at all. We had like these funny names, and I guess it might not be clear, but actually you're talking to one service at the port 80,043, I can't tell you anymore what services was, but as I said, we had like maybe, I don't know, 100 services maybe. Each of them had their own port. You needed to look up what it was, but that was how we talked to another service. Yeah, Johannes, he's actually here. You might know him as Fish from the IRC, then started to work on our first DNS-based service discovery. It was supposed to be like one system where you could like discover both Bazooka deployed services as well as like old school Chef deployed services. It had like this kind of naming scheme which Matt envisioned as well. I mean, it put like some great structure in there. The reason for that was like kind of every new engineer who came like to SoundCloud at that point started to like draw one huge diagram to like try to like understand like this huge infrastructure which was like spread all over the part. So this was actually more or less just another attempt to like put some structure in our services. And yeah, we had like Prometheus support now, at that point we also developed like DNS service discovery support in Prometheus to like now use this new DNS service discovery to not longer have the need to like use Chef to like generate statically configured targets in our Prometheus config. One lesson learned here, talk to me afterwards if you find it interesting. Don't do that. Don't put like team or product or like any meta information into your routing. These things change and you don't want to update your service configuration just to tell it, hey, actually the product was renamed because some product manager thought, okay, or like there was some reason to rename the product and now we have to change all our services. Don't do that. Remove that, please. Yeah, and then unfortunately also in 2013 it was like the first very, very sad moment because Matt left SoundCloud again after just 1 year. He, in just like 12 months, he definitely left like a huge, or made like a huge impact. I mean, he kicked off Prometheus, he kicked off our understanding of like we need metrics and metrics are important, we can't scale without that. He kicked off service discovery, he actually worked a lot also on the on-call schedules and like the introduction of on-call teams. But yeah, there were like lots of reasons why he had to leave, but it meant that Julius had like kind of a hard time because now, after being skeptical just like 1 year before, if it's like possible to build like such a huge system, suddenly was alone and was like had to like solve the thing on his own. So I know it was like a hard time for like both of them at that moment. And I guess I need to speed up a little bit. Some other highlights from 2013. So we had like a service discovery at SoundCloud. In this year, also thanks to Matt, we transitioned to a model of like you build it, you own it, and you're on call for it, similar to Outbrain. We, the first team started to write like runbooks. There might be other talking about runbooks and alerting, but definitely helped a lot to like understand, okay, if I get a page, what I'm supposed to do. And yeah, Björn joined also in 2013, but at that point he was not working on Prometheus yet. He was assigned to like some other project, but we started to get like our soon to be next core contributor of Prometheus. And at the Prometheus side, so at the end of 2013, we had then Go, Java, and the Ruby client libraries, which pretty much covered all the services or like the main languages we used at SoundCloud. The alert manager was already born in July, also 2013. And yeah, the work on PromDish started. So yeah, as I misunderstood, so Grafana did not exist at that point. Grafana was started like in early 2014. And Julius saw the need, okay, we need like something to make it easy for people to like put all these graphs together because as we all know, /graph is nice for exploration, but doesn't really work. And that was actually then the point when we've got our first hire over Prometheus. So Stuart, who sits also here in the first row, looked at like famous GitHub people for like new opportunities to work on, and came across the Prometheus project and came across PromDish and thought like, hey, actually guys, what you do there is pretty ugly. Let me help you. And yeah, then he pretty much wrote PromDish from that point on. I think it's like 90% is like Stuart's code in there. Actually, most of the time, I think he worked on that without actually ever having a Prometheus server. So he just like built a great UI without actually being able to try out the queries, which I also find like pretty impressive. And yeah, we had like 8 teams already using Prometheus. And I think it was like, I can't count anymore because retention. We don't, I think we had like around 10 Prometheus server production kind of running our infrastructure for like these different teams scraping the data. Yeah, Prometheus did not have any point releases at that point. It was just like Git as a SHA-based, and they, I think, pretty much continuously deployed every time there was something worth putting out. Jumping to 2014, oh shit, okay, I think I will need to cut the questions and we'll try to make it until 11. The push gateway was started in the beginning of 2014. I won't go into this topic, as we all know, it's very religious. But we had the need to like also get metrics at that point for our ephemeral jobs, mostly MapReduce jobs running on Hadoop, or then also the Chef client itself. So all the stuff which disappears after like a couple of seconds. Yeah, and our service discovery at that point wasn't even able to like put them up already in that time, so there was no point that Prometheus could like scrape these. We had the need for like scraping these ephemeral jobs, and I looked. So this was in January 2014. And the very, very first commit of the push gateway had that part in the README, which I found is still worth putting out. So the push gateway was not intended to be like a stats-D thing. It was really just like a cache, so that Prometheus had some time to like actually get these metrics as the targets were already done. And yeah, also in the beginning of 2014, the Prometheus usage outside of SoundCloud started. So as I said, Fish, he wrote like the first service discovery implementation at SoundCloud and did also a lot of the operation and like did all the Chef part for Prometheus. He had left, I think, at the end of 2013, and he happened to join Docker. I was jumping ahead. So yeah, he was joining Docker, and then he knew Prometheus still from SoundCloud, and came to Julius, I guess, and said like, "Hey, dude, I would like to use Prometheus, and I would like actually to still collaborate with you." So we used at SoundCloud also at that point still IRC, so the Prometheus IRC channel was born just for the point of like still being able to talk to like our ex-colleague. And yeah, again, then I was like the third person joining that after like an invitation. And so that was like our first external user then, an ex-SoundClouder, so maybe in the gray area of like external user, who started at Docker and introduced Prometheus at Docker. And I think in May, as Björn said it yesterday, Brian, a former colleague of Björn, quit at Google, or like beginning of 2014, I guess, and like joined BoxEver, and had like also the need, similar to Matt and Julius, of like, hey, I need like a great monitoring system. And he asked Björn, and Björn was like, yeah, maybe look at this Prometheus organization. And that was then our second external user with Brian Russell. And yeah, we're happy to have like a huge core contributor now. And yeah, as Brian likes to say, if it didn't exist, I would have created it. So I guess we were lucky to you were lucky to like had like a head start with that. But since then, a huge collaboration started, and yeah, he is now our diamond sponsor, and I guess it worked out for all of us. And sad part in the story of Prometheus was actually when Prometheus brought a bit too much fire to SoundCloud. So yeah, this was the first, and I believe to that point the only outage or like real huge outage Prometheus caused at SoundCloud. So we all know pull is great, and pull makes it actually super easy to just like put up another server, and you can just like put this up everywhere and like do whatever with that. So Julius and Björn used that extensively to like put up a test server somewhere, which like they could like test new implementation or like new performance improvements, and they just wanted to scrape as many metrics as possible to like run this thing hot to see like where the bottlenecks are. So there was just like some test servers were always running somewhere, which was totally fine. Another interesting point at that time was we switched. So previously, or at the beginning of Prometheus, we had like /metrics.json because we had like this .json or JSON exposition format and the protobuf, and in the beginning there was not HTTP content negotiation. It was just like you either hit like .json or something else, and then we decided actually it makes way more sense to just like have one endpoint and use the HTTP protocol for that. And at that point, we just switched to like from one to the other. And then there were like some services which already had updated their client libraries or their configs, which like, so like there was like some mismatch of like the Prometheus server still thought like I need to scrape metrics.json, but the service is already only opened up /metrics. So there was like one very, it looks pretty cute actually, commit added to Prometheus to like, that was the first time we actually had then like error pages coming back from the client library, because there was like then a 4.4. So the some servers did not provide the other one. Does anyone see the problem with like these 5 lines of code? Okay, except like the core or like Go contributors?
Defer is after the return.
Exactly. So the defer happens after this. So like in the case that the Prometheus server are some target for like metrics.json, and that server already provided /metrics, it returned to 404. This commit was added to like catch that, and probably there was like even more problems without that commit. So we turned an error, and the server was happy. Kind of, because it never really closed the connection. That was like not really a problem for the test server, because it was a test server and whatever. The problem was it also didn't close the connection on the other part, and the other part happened to be our Bazooka process managers. And how Bazooka was implemented, we had like these process managers, and there were like some wrappers around the containers which sent like continuously heartbeats to the process manager to tell it like, hey, I'm still here. And the process managers had just like the default file descriptor limit of 1024, which after some scrapes were hit. So they didn't accept any new connections. And then these managers couldn't also accept these heartbeats anymore. And we had like then a time loop in there after like, okay, if I don't get a heartbeat for whatever, 30 seconds, I have to assume that this container is dead, and I have to market that in the store. So after, I don't know, 15 minutes, all our containers were marked as dead, and SoundCloud was completely down. And we had like obviously lots of lessons learned out of that. I mean, besides that, I mean, I'm not sure I have like seen many such severe outages caused by like one line which needs to be moved up. But some other lessons learned from that: availability checking or health checking is hard. We did not really think this through in Bazooka. I mean, it worked in the good part, but like, yeah, we started to look at the code base afterwards, and I looked at the commits. Like the next 2 days, there were like 2 completely unrelated bugs found in the same part. So there were like actually quite a few problems. So if you implement something like that, take your time. It is not easy. Another part was like, yeah, there was actually not enough instrumentation at all. So after we found that problem, and like, I mean, we could have detected it if we had known that we will run out of file descriptors. We implemented the process collector, you might know from client Go and client Java, which now always like exports process OpenFDs and process MuxFDs, so you can like create an alert over like all your jobs, and like, yeah, I mean, from my experience, you should do that. I mean, since then we have like these alerts, and that thing won't happen again. We also had another problem of like the person who was on call just acts the page because it was very similar to all the other pages which came like in the weeks before. And it was actually one day after our summer party, so everyone was a bit hungover, and it was 7 a.m. in the morning. So it was like, yeah, whatever, I will fix that in an hour. You really need to prevent alerting fatigue. For that, Prometheus had like the alert manager that had like lots of features which like help in that space. Yeah, you really want to make sure your developers don't act on page because it looks so similar to the other noise. I really need to speed up. So at SoundCloud at the end of 2014, we were like kind of in full transition to a microservice architecture. Because of that, unfortunately, we had like lots of instabilities, and we understood more and more that we really need like a lot of metrics. All new services were kind of required to have Prometheus instrumentation, so it was not possible anymore to put like a new service out without instrumentation. And on the Prometheus side, we implemented a new text exposition format, and the JSON was deprecated, and with like 1.0, you can't also use it anymore. I think until then we carried it over. Björn and Julius started like a huge storage rewrite. Björn talked about that later. So like from LevelDB to the new chunk file system based. They were like the first commits in the exploration of long-term storage with OpenTSDB, and lots of performance improvements. So like everyone who started using Prometheus like after the public release or only in 2016, you're lucky. So I was kind of like an operations guy of like keeping our Prometheus server, helping everyone, and like I was on call for Prometheus servers. It was not always fun, to say it like that. It was like still early in the development, and a restart could easily take an hour. So I remember more than one night where I was waiting to the Prometheus server to come up again. It's like day and night compared to what like the new storage can do, and like all the performance improvements which have gone into Prometheus and then. And we started with the first point releases. So in 2014, we released 0.1.0 until 0.8. 2015, Prometheus grows really big. So as probably many of you know, in January 26, we publicly announced Prometheus. As I said earlier, we had already like the first external users, but no one, it was always open source, it was always on GitHub, everyone could have found it, but we never really talked about it. And then end of December and beginning of January, Julius and Björn and Brian were like working lots and lots on the Prometheus IO page and like writing documentation, because before that there was also no documentation. So like except Brian, no one could really understand how that worked. Brian needed like probably 5 minutes and then was clear what was going on. But for everyone else, it was like, oh, there's a lot of Go code, some project, whatever. And at that point, I think we also made it really clear Prometheus is a standalone project and not part of any company. So it was actually not started at SoundCloud, and SoundCloud was also just like, I guess, the biggest sponsor of development time and one of the bigger users, but we are just like one of many. Some more highlights in 2015. So at the SoundCloud part, Fabian joined. He actually, I think, met Julius and Björn exactly in this room. The beginning of 2015 was completely hooked, had like some bad experience at the companies before and thought like, hey, that looks like a cool project. And as I said, like I was like kind of I followed the development always of Prometheus, and shortly after Julius told me about like, hey, we met this guy, and Fabian turned up in the IRC channel, there were like huge pull requests of like, I found this target or like this discovery part, I will just completely rewrite it. There was like lots of traction thanks to Fabian joining the team. All our servers pretty much had like Prometheus instrumentation and alerts at that point. Prometheus became like really, really indispensable for like our operations, because we still had unfortunately lots of problems with our microservice architecture. If like one service had like an outage, like it was like this web thing, and like you ditched like one part and like everything wobbled, and without the Prometheus metrics, we didn't have like any chance to like understand what was going on. And on the Prometheus side, we had like, I guess all of us did not really expect that kind of growth and that kind of adoption on the users. We started, we added histograms. Actually, fun fact, we did have histograms in the beginning. So the first 3 metrics were counters, gauges, and histograms, but histograms had like fixed buckets and they did not work at all. So we threw them away. Matt actually did that still. So this was like one of the last parts Matt did. Implemented summaries, which were like nice and shiny because like everything is done on the client, until we found out, okay, that's actually pretty expensive and you can't aggregate them. So we had to introduce histograms back. If you want to learn more about that, there are like kind of a few blog posts, both on Brian's and on the Prometheus page about that topic. Lots and lots of new service discoveries were added. I wasn't really aware, but at the public release, we only had like DNS and static targets in your file. There was nothing else. So it was, all SoundCloud needed pretty much was only in the server. And at the end of 2015, we had then already 8 different service discovery implementations. Enabled pretty much by the rework from Fabian. Double delta encoding was born in 2015, and we had the server releases 9.09 until 9.16.1. We did not follow Zemver at all. There were like the 9.16 releases were kind of funny. They were like huge. 9.16.2 has like, I think, the longest list of features and changes of pretty much all our releases. 2016, we're coming close. So the latest development at SoundCloud, we migrated to Grafana, and dashboard templating, which we did not really have in PromDash, and labels together are like a dream team, as you probably all know, and see the possibilities that open up for us to like generalize our metrics and like have one team building a dashboard and it works just out of the box for everyone, have like immensely helped us. We kind of have like now, if you create a new service, it's kind of like monitoring batteries included. You don't need to do anything anymore. You just like, if you use so we have like a library which has for all our JVM applications, and if you create a new application, you immediately have like a dashboard where you can go to and see the most important metrics, and you have like alerts for that. So compared to like 4 years ago at like 2012, where you didn't have like any monitoring, it's impressive to see like where we ended up. Yeah, we have pretty much noise-free alerting now, thanks to Alert Manager. Actually, Björn changed last week our Slack format, and I was waiting fully 2 days until I could see this new format in my Slack client because we just didn't have any warnings. SoundCloud is very, very stable now, and I attribute it hugely to Prometheus and the ability to have like metrics for everything. So actually this year we reached, so our goal is like 99.9, and we reached that every month, which is the first. So like last year in 2014, let's not talk about that part. On the Prometheus side, the biggest highlights, Varbit, as Björn talked yesterday about it, we joined the CNCF. We reached 1.0, and closing the circle, we came together for the first Prometheus conference. That's what I wanted to show like as an example. That's where we are now with SoundCloud. So you see there you select your Prometheus server. We have like, I don't know, 10, 20 teams all building applications on JVM. They all have like the same client library, and they have like some standard sets of metrics which get exported. So they just select their server, they select their system. Fortunately, no one of you will know what Okidoki is, so I just put up, these are like our metrics from this morning. As you see, we have like, it's stable, and we have like great metrics for that. So like compared to like 2012, I'm really, really pleased where we came up with. Some things we have learned on the way, is the second to last slide. As Julius said, hard work pays off. So I think he didn't really imagine that this would be possible in the end of 2012 when Matt came up with the ideas. It worked, and yeah, especially if you don't think you can make it, I think you had like a really hard time when Matt left. You can push yourself through. Prometheus is like a great example that, yeah, even if something looks like way too big, you can do it. Go was actually perfect choice, I believe. There's a huge community. It fits like natively. Bazooka was actually also written in Go, so it like fit natively in there. I mean, that Matt was able like in the first months to like put instrumentation out was just like because both services were written in Go. Kubernetes is Go, etcd is Go, Consul is Go. There's so many great services in the infrastructure world which are in Go. I believe this was like definitely the right choice. And yeah, it has great language features. Don't deliver features at the compromise of your goals. I think Brian will really like that. So that's like one part Matt actually told me as like one thing he had learned. So he got also like a lot of pressure. I'm personally, to be honest, more like on this practical side. I'm a problem solver. Like I see someone has a problem and I see a solution to that. So like, hey, cool, let's do that. It's not always the right choice. And I want to thank Brian for like keeping us on track there and saying like, no, even though I mean, more often also think like, wait, why, we need that? And then, I don't know, a couple of months later, like, yeah, actually, it was probably good. So, that's definitely one thing I learned, or like, yeah, others learned as well. And yeah, provide clear documentation about your vision, because otherwise no one can follow it. One thing we could have been better, I guess, or like maybe was like coming up with a governance structure earlier. There were like some behind the scenes thing, and I mean, there are like lots of companies involved. We always said like, hey, there's not a single one, but you can't just say that and hope that it works. But I guess so far we came like pretty far, and like, yeah, now with the CNCF, I guess that part is like also more or less solved. Last slide, some acknowledgements. So unfortunately Matt couldn't make it, but yeah, as a father of Prometheus, yeah, I'm one thing for before that with acknowledgement. I only can do it wrong. I mean, there will always be someone who said like, "Why am I not on that list?" I'm sorry in advance, but yeah, I picked someone in chronological order. So like Matt is unfortunately not here. I used the title like "Father of Prometheus" because he came up with it. I guess Julius won't like that, but if
I think I came up with the name.
So yeah, I mean, there are like way too many things I would need to acknowledge Julius for, but like, yeah, one thing is actually for me that he like kept like this community together and like started to like organize this PromCon, and I don't want to ask for like applause for like everyone, but I think for like all this hard work Julius put on this project and like pushed it through, I would ask for like a huge round of applause for Julius. Yeah, Bernard Schaefer, you probably don't know him. He created the push gateway. He did like a lot of work in the beginning of the server, but yeah, also definitely helpful and like necessary. Yeah, Fischer, Johannes, as I said, working on service discovery and the operation. Stuart then helping out with PromDish. Björn, I mean, all of them have like contributed way more than these things. These are just like the most notable ones. The storage, yeah, you know Björn for as like kind of the father of the storage or like owner of the storage these days, and the Golang library. Brian does way too many things to like put out anything in particular. I'm pretty sure, yeah, without Brian and Julius, we would not be where we are. And yeah, for me, actually, personally, what stands out a little bit is like keeping us on track, even if it's like painful at times of like hearing like, no, we can't do that. But in the end, I think it pays off to like to keep on track for your vision. Yeah, Fabian does also way too many things like to pull out one thing, but what I find really impressive is like how much code he wrote, like especially in 2015. So like, I hope you're fine with like that attribution. Yeah, there are many more I can't really list here. I mean, we have like hundreds of contributors, but yeah, these were like the first ones, and like ones also who worked at SoundCloud I wanted to put out here. I really apologize for like completely talking way too long, but thank you. That was it.